My good relatives across this great Navajo nation, the Nebikeya, no Hokat, the Nenoshinigi, my good relatives, Shadibit Ahnidona Enchle, Tranisani Bashino, Kintlichini Dashichi, Ashihidashinale, Ekut de Kodot the Nebenant, being a candidate for the office of the Navajo Nation President. I declared my candidacy over 60 days ago. One of the fundamental reasons that I have agreed to be a candidate was because many of you have stated your dismay. Many of you have expressed your disappointment, and many of you have fell victim to a lot of the disrespect and non-compliance with the rule of law today. Many of you have been victimized because the compliance with the rule of law was never in your interest or for your interest. And so that is one of the reasons why we have our office, our law office. Many of you have come through this office and expressed your wrongdoing that was rendered upon you. And because of the wrongdoing, you fell victim to some of these things. You were hurt by that. You were traumatized by that. But yet, it was never corrected. It was overlooked. You were manipulated. You were victimized in one way or another. You were laughed at. People made fun of you because of that. And so you came through this office to try to get some help, some relief of some sort. And many of you, we have prevailed on your cases to bring some relief. It may not replace or quell and soothe the pain that you have suffered, but nevertheless, from the legal point of view, you got some relief, some resolution in your lives. And so today, that is primarily our practice here in our law office. Then some of you have fell victimized by the government itself, the Navajo Nation government, the different divisions of the Navajo Nation executive branch, and then the different components of the Navajo Nation legislative branch as well. And so through those aspects of our Navajo Nation government, some things have been done upon you and done to you. And so you brought your issues here, your concerns, to our office, and we filed those types of action against the Navajo Nation government on your behalf. So when you look at it, we're working for the Navajo people. We're working in your best interests. We've been doing that for over 20 years already to defend you, to ensure that your rights, to ensure that things that you have that you hold dear to you, that they are protected, that the government cannot just come in and violate you like that. That's been the bulk of our cases here in the last several years through our office. So through that, there's a lot of things that I, as your legal counsel, have realized that is going on with our Navajo Nation government. It has gotten to the point where things are not getting resolved. Case in point, if I file action here on behalf of a client suing the Navajo Nation, we have to tell the Navajo Nation that we're going to sue them. I have to send a letter to the president. I have to send a certified letter to the Attorney General, also to the Speaker, and also the Chief Legislative Council. And they have to be certified and they have to sign that green card to say that they picked up that notice. After 30 days from the last time that notice has been mailed back over here, then I can file legal action against the Navajo Nation government. They call it sovereign immunity. Then on top of that, after I filed my legal action on behalf of you, the Navajo people, then the Navajo Nation has 60 days to respond back to us. And most of the time, about 95% of the time, the Navajo Nation Department of Justice will come back and say, motion to dismiss because of sovereign immunity, because of this and this and this and this and that. So that's been the tactic. They automatically want to dismiss it. But that still does not resolve it. We have been pretty successful in overcoming those. Then we go to the next step. By the time we resolve your issues and problems for the Navajo Nation's wrongdoing, we're looking at 2 years now, 3 years even. I have a case that's even 5 years. And I just got notice today that we're finally going to have a hearing on it after about 6 or 7 years. That type of problem solving on behalf of you, the Navajo people, prompted me to say, I got to do something here. Because there's powers and authorities vested within the executive branch that I believe that we can begin to execute on your behalf so that these issues and resolutions can be done in a more expedient way. In many cases, it may not even go to court. So those are some things that are in place within our plans to help you resolve your problem. Now, the reason why these problems arise is because the Navajo Nation government is notorious for violating the law. They're notorious for it. They either make up their own law at the chapter level, maybe at other departments and other aspects of the Navajo Nation government. When it finally becomes the case, then there's nothing that they can fall back upon. That's what you say in Navajo. So that's usually one of the problems. The other problem is just a total ignorance for the people. Just a total ignorance. Just because you're the Navajo Nation government doesn't mean that you can just push around your own people. That you can just tell them that this and that. Yeah, you have a whole Department of Justice to support you as the government. But the grandma or the grandpa over here, or the person that's being violated over here, they got to come up with their own money to hire legal counsel so that they can bring their matter to court. There is something absolutely wrong with this picture here. So that's one of the reasons why I've declared my candidacy for the president of the Navajo Nation. The rule of law is important today. The rule of law is important in so many ways. Because the law, as we see it, is the lifeblood, is the breath of life, is the blood flow, is the intelligence. It's the part of a governmental body that drives everything. If it wasn't for the law, it wouldn't function. And so the law just didn't come to the Four Sacred Mountains after 1868 either. We were given a set of laws in our history called Fundamental Law, the Nepabihizani. They say that this law was given to us in the black world, by the holy people. They made a law through the form of a light beam. And it became a male law. There was another light beam that came through again, and that became a female law. So together, there's a duality system of law that we have. Each one of these laws are equally balanced. One's not superior or inferior to the other. It's balanced. So through that, then they gave us the law that regulates this earth and the sky, that regulates this air, that regulates the water, that regulates this sunlight, that regulates spring, summer, fall, and winter, that regulates the way that the moon, the crescent moon, and the way that it forms and goes into a full moon and then goes into darkness again. Chanipaz, Shahashkeshnatza, that phase, it regulates that. So that's what we call natural law today. Then the holy people again created another set of law for the holy people's own purposes and reasons for them to live by. That they have to abide by that law also. It's called traditional law. An example of that is that the lightning people, they're supposed to only go to certain places and only do certain things. And so a lot of times, if they strike a tree, they say that that lightning person takes ownership of that tree. So as a nahokat, as a person, you can't go over there. If you do, you violated the law of that lightning bolt, the lightning person. So then the consequence is that you become sick. You have certain physical problems. So then through that ceremonial agreement, you could say that ceremonial loophole, then through that, then you become okay. You hire a medicine man, just like a legal counsel. That medicine man will go over to the lightning person and give an offering in the form of ketan, a prayer stick, or some sand paintings, or some minerals, and plead on your behalf and say, he didn't and she didn't mean to violate your space here. So whatever problems that person has, take it off of him or her, and here's an offering. That's what a ceremony essentially is. So then it's granted, then you become well. There's healing that comes in. You become okay. So that's what you call traditional law. Then you have customary law. When the people were going to come back to the four sacred mountains after being with our grandma, our mom, White Shell Woman, she created 4 clans. Kinyaani, Tochana, Todichini, and Hashlishni. And through that, she created the 4 languages. Through that, she created the 4 sets of laws, as we call it, customary law today. This law was going to regulate us when we come back here to the 4 sacred mountains. It was going to regulate the birthing process. There was going to be birth. It regulated the puberty process, kinalta. It regulated the marital process. And then it regulated how a person will reach that old age of 102 years old. That's the law that regulates that. So, for example, when a child is born, they say that in either to sanctify that existence where that light and that breath of life actually came in, that soft spot on a little child, they take that child and they build a fire and they put that child towards the fire for that heat to come in to sanction that life. That's a customary law. When that child first laughs, the law of Salt Woman, when Salt Woman came over to White Shell Woman's home, when White Shell Woman was just a baby and that baby laughed in front of her, White Shell Woman laughed. So she took a part of her body in that form of a salt and she said, I'm going to give you this offering, my grandchild, White Shell Woman, so that through that you will always have happiness in your life. And through that, I'm going to make a giveaway here, give out some good things here, give some meat and give some corn and other things to our relatives here, so that you could be like that you could be charitable. That's why they do that. And so that's the reason why that's a customary law. When that child reaches pubertyhood, when they have that first period a woman does, they have that kinalta ceremony. That is one of the most important part of this customary law for a child. Because that sanctions that blood flow. That sanctions it so that that birthing process, that generation process, the spirit of that will continue to go forward. The same way with the men. When their voice changes, then they have a sweat ceremony for them. And that sweat ceremony, it sanctions the body. It sanctions the reproductive system as well. It sanctions all of that so that that generation could go. That's customary law. These are laws that we live by. These are laws that are still pertinent today. And so that's what we call customary law. And then we call another set of laws called common law, is the way that we go about our life every day. We cannot sleep when that sun goes up. We have to wake up before that sun comes up. Because they say that if that sun comes up before you awake, then that sun, your ka, is going to look at you and say, I wonder if my son or my daughter is sick, he or she is still laying over there. So then you invite all sorts of things. Number one, they say that you invite laziness into your life. Do not ever invite laziness into your life. That laziness is probably one of the most evil things that are there, because it will make you and say certain things. That's a common law. And so these kind of things, these laws are all in place. That's what we call the Diné Fundamental Law. So that part of it, the teachings and the discipline, there's a male and a female. There's a warrior spirit, there's a blessing way spirit. It's equal like that. That's how we live today. And so that's what we call fundamental law. Then by virtue, not by our choice, not because we invited it, not because we wanted it, almost you could say that at gunpoint, we were given what we were given today. So we have this Western way of jurisprudence, this Western way of problem resolution. It's adversarial. It's adversarial because there's one party versus the other party, and one tries to win. Through different procedures and strategies, one usually wins. That's adversarial. Versus fundamental law. Over here, fundamental law is about healing. It's about resolution. It's about healing. To heal the person or to resolve it in a blessing way. Those are the differences, what we have here today. So in 2002, the Navajo Nation Council codified this fundamental law in Title 1, Section 201. That's where it begins, of the Navajo Nation Code. And so today, that law is here. But whether it's fundamental law or whether it's Western law in our code, we have a problem with abiding by it. The Navajo Nation government is notorious for violating the law. So a lot of times, you people, our relatives, they're at a disadvantage because they have to go up against Goliath now. Goliath has a whole Navajo Nation Department of Justice. They have lawyers that they pay that will defend the Navajo Nation against its own people over here. And so that's the way that it is today. So I have made it a practice of my law practice for the last several years to represent you, the Navajo people, for violations that have been done by the Navajo Nation government against its people. And that has been the primary bulk of my practice these days. And it seemed like my batting record has been pretty good as well. Because finally, you can tell the Navajo Nation government, here's your law. This is what it says, and you violated it. And here are the facts, here are the evidence, and here are my witnesses. That's how it has been going. So, my frustration today is the fact that when I file legal action against the Navajo Nation government, this is how it goes. A client comes in, I take on the case, I file a complaint. Before anything else, I have to notify the Navajo Nation government to tell them, I am going to sue you. It's sovereign immunity notice. So I have to send a letter to the Attorney General, to the President of the Navajo Nation. I have to send a letter to the Speaker, the Chief Legislative Council. And they have to be certified. When the last party picks up that certified notice, I count 30 days from there. And I have to make sure that 30-day elapses Then I can file my complaint in court. After my complaint is processed, given a docket number, I have to serve these parties. Upon service, the Navajo Nation government has 60 days to respond back to my complaint. And so most of the time, their tactic is motion to dismiss. That's what their popular tactic is. Probably have a template somewhere in the Department of Justice sitting there. And so they have 60 days. Remember now, the person came to me with a very severe issue, something that has been traumatizing to them. They got to wait 30 days so that we could notify the government. Then we got to wait another 60 days for the government to respond back after we file a lawsuit. That's 90 days already. Meanwhile, the Navajo person, the Navajo people, the Navajo victim over here continues to go through this life without any relief. Then the litigation begins. On an average, about 2 years is usually the amount of time that this litigation, from the time it actually begins and resolves. 2 years. Let's say if it's a wrongful termination. We're litigating this for about 2 years. Meanwhile, this person's not working no more because he or she got fired wrongfully. And it takes 2 years for that to be proven. And once proven, then the person has already suffered 2 years. So these are the kind of frustrations that I have with the current system that is in place. So rather than going through that long-term litigation, I felt that maybe there's something that we can do on the executive branch side, as the president of the Navajo Nation, to begin to exercise some of those executive powers and authorities to resolve this. One of the first ways that we can resolve this, here is an example, is to tell all the divisions to begin to start understanding the Navajo Nation Personnel Policies Manual. The majority of the lawsuits that are there in terms of employment is some mid-level supervisor didn't even read the thing because they were never orientated on it. And so they violated personnel policies, or they violated civil rights of somebody. Or they had a political agenda already and they wanted to go after this person. These are the kind of things. So those are the kind of things that we need to begin to correct immediately without even having to go to court. So those are some things that prompted me to be running for this office, Navajo Nation President, today, my relatives. So again, the rule of law is in place. The other part is that you have a rule of law, yes, but it's not strong enough. Right now, perhaps that a person gets convicted of driving under the influence, DWI, DUI, then they get tossed in, they go through court, and then they plead guilty, or they're prosecuted, they're proven to be guilty. They might only be given a penalty of $300, $500, maybe time served. That's it. Methamphetamine convictions are the same. All of these. So there's no deterrent that's there. Versus New Mexico. There are mandatory laws here. Number one, first offense of a DUI conviction is that your license is revoked. You can't drive. And then you have mandatory 30-day treatment. Then you have all of these others, and then you pay an average about $2,500 to $3,000 in court fees and penalties. Now that's a deterrent. Whereas over here, $500, that's it, slap on the wrist, and more than likely 10 days down the road, they're going to be doing the same thing again. We need a council who will look at this. Give me those laws that I can begin to execute over here on the executive side. That's why we're here. My relatives. That rule of law has to be adhered to and has to begin from the top. It has to begin from the top with me, the president, with the council delegates, with the division directors. It doesn't go up, it comes down. And so a leader will do that, will advocate that, will make sure that everybody does that. something that they say in the Marine Corps all the time is that if you're a non-commissioned officer, staff and non-commissioned officer, make sure that your troops eat first. Make sure that your troops are tended to first. Then you eat last. That's the way it should be. You should be the one to abide by that law first, not the other way around. And so that rule of law is sacred. That rule of law is important. That rule of law is what is the lifeblood, the breath of life, the vision and the hearing and the five senses of a government. And if we can't achieve that, at least, I can't speak for the council, but at least with the executive branch, that's something that I hold highly sacred and very sacred. So those are some things that I wanted to bring out to you. What prompted you to run for president? This is one of the main reasons why I'm running for president. Because I think that through that, then it opens up opportunities. It opens up some things for us. It opens up a lot of opportunities. It also deregulates things. It diminishes a lot of the bureaucracy. It diminishes a lot of the so-called red tape. It diminishes and minimizes regulation also. Because the rule of law, if you adhere to it, rules of law are made so that it benefits the people. It's not an inhibitor. It benefits it. It gives it momentum. It makes things easier, clearer, and more easily workable. That's what law is supposed to be about. Just like fundamental law. That's what it's for. Not to create chaos, not to go after somebody, not to be negative or harmful with it, but that's what it should be, supposed to be. So we're going to have to balance that out. Fundamental law and Western law, we're going to have to balance that out to benefit you, the Navajo Nation. And so that's what this campaign and the platform and the priority that we're standing on today, and we're advocating for that. And thank you for listening to me again, and thank you for your kind attention.